Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And if you don't know where your numbers are falling, hey, this is Joel Walsman, CEO and Master Electrician of Jefferson Electric. Today we are in our new shop. This is it, 22,000 square feet of elbow room for Jefferson Electric to grow and expand. We're going to be talking about estimating. I do not know everything, but I have conviction around a few things. If estimates have you climbing the walls, let's talk. I'm making a baseline assumption in this video that you know the trade and the craft, and we're zeroing in on estimate basics. Estimating basic number one is the pre-call. This is the first thing you do, right? On the phone when you're talking to the customer, you ask enough questions that you've got a really good concept that what they're asking for is something you can do. And you're mentally prepared around that subject. You've looked up codes fresh in your mind. You've thought about some best practices. You've looked up a couple historic projects to see how they worked out for you, where your prices were historically. You've done a little market research and it's fresh and top of mind. See, when I'm standing in front of a customer and they're throwing requests and asks at me, and I'm trying to do some quick mental math and I'm trying to give them a concept for budget and bracket, guys, poor money convictions. I come up short and I give them poor expectations. I'm like, yeah, we're probably in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. It looks bad then when you come back with a $6,000 quote. Yikes, that's embarrassing. Do the pre-call, put pen to paper, walk in prepared, do not go in cold. Even if you're a highly experienced estimator, I'm telling you, a pre-call is a differentiator. Differentiator. See, what do? I walk in. The first thing I say is, hey, Mr. Customer, good afternoon. Here, 2 free drinks to my favorite coffee shop. See, I bought a whole box of free drink cards to my favorite local coffee shop. And I'll hand them 2 of those along with my business card, and I'm differentiating. They're like, whoa, hey. Nobody's ever done that. You'd be surprised how customers respond. Some of them are like, I don't drink coffee, because 50% of Americans don't. They're like, I don't drink coffee, but my friend loves coffee shops. I'll give them to him. Like, now your customer's the good guy, right? You're the good guy, the customer's the good guy. Everybody's winning. Differentiate yourself. You have to not be constrained by what everybody is doing, and you have to be unafraid to be something diametrically different. And you have to take courage knowing that being differentiated is a positive, not a negative. But most people go with the pack. So they do what the pack is doing. Guess what? The pack's not always right. And how is the customer going to remember you if there's nothing unique, nothing distinct, nothing exceptional? You're just another Joe. That's it. Next, we have the upfront contract. The upfront contract is going to sound funny to you if you've never heard it before. I almost guarantee it. It's going to sound extremely counterintuitive, but this is what my upfront contract sounds like. It's not a script. It is not a script. It's very organic, and it has to sound organic. If it sounds scripted, then the customer's going to push you away. You're going to sound untrustworthy if you sound scripted. But here it is. Hey, Mr. Customer, thanks for inviting me in today. Typically, an estimate like this takes between 35 and 55 minutes. Are we still good for that time? I get agreement around the time frame. And they say, yeah, sure, that's about what I expected. And I say, appreciate it. Naturally, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. And obviously, you're going to have questions for me. And at the end of this, usually there are one of 2 outcomes. Either we find out we're not a good fit. Are you comfortable telling me no if we're not a good fit for each other? Listen to that. People hate to be sold. They hate it. That I'm just going to take what I have, I'm going to shove it right down their throat. Doesn't matter. I'm here to walk away with a sale. That's not what you want. Because you know what? You might find out they're not right for you. And did you hear what I said? If we find out we're not right for each other, are you comfortable telling me no? We're not right for each other. What I said there too, in very gentle language, is, I might decide that you're not right for me. I have walk-away power. Walk-away power is an estimating superpower. I didn't have walk-away power for a long, long time. I went in trying to close every customer, every job. And the ones that I worked the hardest to close, some of those jobs are the ones that have caused me more pain in electrical contracting than anything else, because the job wasn't right, the customer wasn't right. And now I'm stuck. I'm in a contractual relationship, and there's a lot of pain around that. So let me tell you a quick story. A friend is playing sports and he injures his shoulder. And he calls his buddy who's a doctor. And the friend explains the situation over the phone to the doctor. And the doctor says, let me ask you a couple questions. First, this, and then that. And 21 questions later, kid you not, 21 questions later, he gives his friend a diagnosis. And he says, hey, you know what your problem is? You need to take some Bayer, you need to ice it, you need to rest for 2 weeks, don't do that again, and it's going to recover, you've just pulled a muscle. Boom, done. And the guy with the hurt shoulder says, hey, out of curiosity, you see a lot of people, how early, when did you think that you had my diagnosis? Because you asked a lot of questions. And the doctor says, oh, I see this all the time, you're absolutely right. And I had your diagnosis about 25 seconds into your explanation. And the friend says, why did you ask so many questions? And the doctor says, because your health is very important. And I'm not going to get sloppy. And I discipline my process to ask no fewer than 21 questions. That's that doctor's process. Would you trust a doctor who asked 2 questions? Would you trust a doctor who didn't consider what medications you're taking? Would you trust a doctor who doesn't care what your blood pressure is or what your blood sugar is or any of these things, right? Would you trust an estimator who doesn't seem concerned with your goals and objectives, with the big picture, with your historical experience, with other electricians, with why you've lived in this house for 10 years, but you're just calling an electrician for the first time? Have you worked with other people in the past? Just curious. Have you called them? Am I your only quote? These are all fair questions to ask, because one of the elements of this situation is that you and me, Mr. Customer, we have equal business stature. Relationships happen best with equal business stature. It's where I'm not superior to you. I'm not talking down to you, Mr. Customer. And you're not always right. This is a peer-to-peer relationship. Equal business stature, where we have honesty and transparency in communication, because neither of us is superior over and against the other. So be the doctor. Ask those 21 questions. Discipline the process, because if you're missing some piece of vital information, you could waste 2, 3, 4 hours putting together a very precise quote just to find out they needed this job done yesterday and you're booked out 4 weeks. You wasted 4 hours. That could be $400, $500, $600 of revenue that you flushed down your estimating toilet. I've done that many times, too many times. So that upfront contract, I want you to really hone that. I want you to practice that in the truck on the way to the job. I do, and I've used it so many times. And again, it sounds like this. Appreciate your time today. Are we still good for 35 to 45 minutes? Naturally, you're going to have questions for me. Obviously, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. And sometimes I'll insert a value statement, especially if I feel the customer's being a little bit hesitant or skeptical, right? People are skeptical of anyone who's trying to sell something, of anyone who's coming into their home. There can just be a little bit of guardedness. So I'll make a value statement. I'll say, and before we move any further, I just want you to know that I want you to be absolutely delighted. I want you to have nothing less than a 5-star experience. And if at any point your experience with us is anything less than 5-star, would you do me the honor of letting me know? That disarms the customer. They're like, hey, if that's the terms that we're operating under, I can sign up for that. I can get excited about that, because that's exactly what I want. I want a 5-star experience. I appreciate you saying that. And a lot of times customers will be like literally, you'll see the body language like, what? I've had customers say, what did you just say? Or, absolutely, that sounds great. Watch their body language. Don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to make a value statement. Don't be afraid, have walkaway power. Equal business stature. Be the doctor. So that upfront contract continues. And again, you have to get comfortable with it. It sounds funny the first time you say it. It sounds funny the first 5 times you say it, but it's powerful. If we find out we're not a good fit for each other, are you comfortable telling me no? Because the customer's like, whoa, hey, wait a second. If you're comfortable with me telling you no, then that means you're not going to hound me. You're not going to email me forever. I'm not going to have to block your number. If I tell you no, that means you leave me alone. That means we have clarity in the relationship. That means I'm under no obligation. Suddenly, this is a comfortable conversation, as opposed to what often becomes an subtly adversarial conversation where I'm trying to push you into something that you might not want. Are you comfortable telling me no? Because guess what? I'm comfortable telling you no. I don't say that, right? But that's got to be my conviction. That has to be my estimating conviction. I've got equal business stature. I've got walkaway power. I don't need this job. Sometimes it's best if I don't get this job. Bonding and rapport. What is it? It's valuable. Let me tell you what it is. Bonding and rapport is connecting with your customer as a person. Not just being a technician or a salesperson, but connecting with them as a person. And it's not just talking about, oh, like, you know, I have a cousin who went to that college, or, you know, hey, I noticed looks like you have kids. Tell me how many kids you have. That stuff's decent. It's okay. It's fine. I'm not trying to get you to strip that away. But bonding and rapport is actually more than that. Bonding and rapport is understanding who you're talking to. Are they a baby boomer? Are they a millennial? Because those people use very different language, right? Millennials want to know what you feel, and baby boomers want to know what the facts are. You have to understand who you're interacting with, and then mirror and match. In the bonding and rapport process, give back to your customer, right? If you have someone who's very detailed and very on top of all the little granular, and they've got a nice written list, and it's not just written, it's on an Excel doc, and it's got sub-bullets, and they hand you a schedule of work. Now you know you're probably dealing with an accountant, an engineer, a lawyer, somebody who is a detailed professional in their craft. And if you don't interact with them on that level, in that manner, if you become just kind of this like shooting from the hip, you know, gunslinger cowboy, they won't respect you. You need to mirror and match what they've got going on. Be yourself, but we all do this in friendships. We all do this in warm and casual relationships. When we're maybe meeting for a job interview, we might be, you know, backing our chair up and crossing our arms. But guess what? When we're talking to a best buddy over a Coke, we're comfortable. And if one dude's like hanging back in his chair, the other guy's hanging back in his chair, right? We're mirroring and matching each other. The tone of the relationship is happening. And I'm feeling what you're feeling, and I'm picking up what you're putting down. So mirror and match your customer. Understand who they are. Understand if they're a people person and they want to connect with you first to make sure you're a decent guy or gal. Understand if they're you know, someone who's slow to bond, and if you act too overt, too friendly, too quick, they'll be suspicious. They'll push back. They're like, hey, no, I don't have 50 friends. I have 2. And I've had those friends since elementary school. And if you try to get too close too quick, I'm very suspicious. So mirror and match your customer. Be comfortable, be casual, but guess what? If you're too comfortable and too casual and they're a polished professional, again, they may not connect with you. They may not respect you. So bonding and rapport is giving your customer back to themselves. Hey, I'm who you need to be. I'm not fake. I'm not insincere. But if you need details, I give you details. If you need space, I give you space. If you want friendship, I can give you friendship. I can genuinely do any and all of these things for you. Let me tell you about the personality of a customer. That is the hardest for me in bonding and rapport, in mirroring and matching. It's that high D personality, D for dominant. There are not too many. Less than 10% of the United States of America is a high D, but they can be tricky because my MO, my mode of operation is to become subservient to a high D. Like, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir, right away, sir, right? That's what I tend to do. But that's not necessarily what a D wants. They want a peer-to-peer relationship. They want to know that, you know, if they get big, you can stand up straight. You're not intimidated because you've got nothing to be afraid of. You've got nothing to hide. You're convicted about your prices. You're convicted about the quality of your services. You have full conviction around everything that you're about to do, and they're like, whoa, I like that. It's a real man. And we can have a meaningful, business-like, factual, hard-hitting, down to the nuts and bolts conversation. Here's another one. This is tricky right here. This is really tricky. Sometimes your customer will not make the time for you. They'll be like on a phone call. They'll be like, it's over there. Just check it out. Like, you know, I'm important. I got things to do. That could be one of 2 things in the bonding and rapport department. That could be that they're very bright and they're very high performing, but they don't have the people skills. So they're trying to create a little distance because they feel awkward. Or maybe they feel awkward because they're a professional that makes, a doctor, I've had this all the time with polished professionals. They make $500,000 a year as a surgeon, but they don't know squat about electrical. So you're walking in there, and what they're expecting from a contractor, what customers expect from a contractor, especially women, they're expecting you to talk down to them because that's what 75% of contractors do, and they feel like the idiot. They make $500,000, $1 million a year doing life-saving operations on emergency room patients, but when it comes to plug things, you know, in the wall where you get the power from, they feel like idiots. They don't know the terminology. They don't really know how to express exactly what they want, and you have to hold them safe. You have to not talk down to them. Don't correct their vocabulary. Just simply seek to understand. Because if you've got someone who you're making feel like an idiot and you think that's building you up, guess what? It's creating distance between you and your customer that you need to bond with. Because all things being equal, people would rather do business with their friends. All things being unequal, people would rather do business with their friends. So if you don't bond and connect with your customer, you're missing out. And bonding and rapport happens slowly over the entire course of the estimating process. So if you've only budgeted time to be a technician and not to be a person, when you show up for an estimate, you're missing out. You're missing out on the most important dynamic of the entire estimating process. That is estimating basic numero uno. Bonding and rapport. Your customer has to know that you're a real person who cares, or they're not going to want to hire you. They have to know you're a real person who respects them, who respects their time. About value statements. You need to consider what value statements work for you and your business, because they have to be entirely sincere. Let me tell you the kinds of things that I say. 3 quick examples. Number 1, hey, Mr. Customer, I want to make sure I'm respecting your time. Are we still on track? That's simple, but I'm just very intentionally using the word respecting your time, because my customers, that's the number 1 valuable thing right after their family. It's even more valuable than their house, their car, it's their time. Number 2, hey, I want to make sure everyone I come in contact with feels totally respected and cared for. Are we still on track? You know, you're reading body language. You know, use the right value statement based upon the customer's interactions to the things that you're saying, the things that you're doing. It's usually about respect. It's usually about time. And then there's a lot of power around outcomes. So just use a simple value statement, insert it in there, or 3 or 4 times through the course of the conversation. Keep it short, keep it sweet, but your customer, they won't just hear it, they'll feel it. My advice to you, based upon my experience, is do not enter the nuts and bolts of the conversation until you have done full due diligence to the sales and relational dynamics. But at this point, assuming you've covered the bases, inclusions and exclusions, absolutely vital. I don't care particularly, and I see how different estimating models fit with different job types. I don't care if you itemize, I don't care if you lump sum, I don't care if you piece rate your estimates. Any one of those is fine, but what I do care about are terms and conditions. Terms and conditions, they'll get you. That's where you lose $200, $300, $400 at a time. That's where you get stuck not being able to process change orders. That's where you get stuck with customers in a tricky situation. If you're poking holes in drywall, who's responsible for the patch and repair? Who's responsible for final paint? If there are permits required, are you going to pull those permits? If there are approvals that are required for historic districts, which are distinct from permits, who's responsible for the approvals? Who's responsible for coordinating with the utility for a disconnect and reconnect of power? Are you going to pull permits? You've got to include everything that's included, and you have to exclude everything that's excluded. And if you don't get it in black and white, it's going to bite you. Here's another thing. If you're doing a bigger job for a customer, what's the payment schedule? Is it a draw as you go? Is it a 50% up front, 50% upon completion? Black and white. Good fences make good neighbors. Here's another expectation to clarify in black and white. Duration of project. You'd be surprised how disconnected customers are. They see like a $600 estimate and they're disconnected from what that means. They're like, oh, could that be a 3-day job? I don't know. Like, they're willing to pay it. It's worth it to them, but they don't know what it means with respect to time. Or they see a $2,000 job and they're like, oh man, you probably won't be here, but what, just for the morning? They're like, no, that's gonna take me 2 days. Maybe less, but you've got to build in the contingency. Good fences make good neighbors. Clarify everything that's important in writing. A target metric that we have for all of our team members as an easy to hold on to baseline metric is $1,000 per man per day. That is to be our average across the entire year or better. So we have a price floor. And when we're looking at the estimate, we can say, look, gross revenues, and projected manpower, and that's another cross-check to make sure those things match up. So $1,000 per man per day as a baseline. Now we're living in the Midwest, Indianapolis. That's like the cost of living capital of the world for big cities. And your rates, they might need to be higher. You might need to adjust from there, but $1,000 per man per day is an easy number. That's gross revenue, an easy number for all my estimators to hold on to as the floor for providing bids and pricing to customers. And if you're not able to do that, then I would challenge you that you might have a poverty mindset. You might have a skills gap. Early in the trade, I did not charge $1,000 per man. I didn't think I was worth it. I didn't think the customers would pay it. I was selling out of my own pocketbook, and I was blinded by my own head trash. Margins, 40 to 60% gross margin. That's not net profit, that's gross margin. That should be a comfortable place for your services to live. Service work is going to have higher margins. You might even push 70. You might get lucky and get 80% margins on some jobs, but those are going to be small, short-lived jobs. And your service team is going to have more travel time. They're going to have fewer billable hours in a given day. Your projects team might have 8, 9, 10 billable hours in a day. In an equivalent day, equivalent payroll, your service team might have 6 or 7 billable hours. So a lower margin on your projects team, higher margin on your service team, but potentially pretty equivalent total revenues coming from an electrician in each department. If it's less than that, you're chewing into your bottom line and you're not walking away with a sufficient profit to value and respect your time. One of our convictions is that our time is very valuable. So a customer has already paid $50 for an estimate for us to come out there, and we've expressed that over the phone. We've got another video on that subject, but let me tell you what it does. It differentiates and it allows us the time and space to provide value to that customer. So we're showing up with screwdriver, flashlight, digital multimeter, not just sales training, but lots of technical training. Our top guys do estimates. That's right, we're pulling them from the field. You may not agree with this, but we're pulling them from the field and we're sending them on estimates. And they've got sales training and strong technical acumen. And we're providing high value estimates, and we're converting at a high rate, at a high dollar. Because the customer's like, wow, you took the panel cover off, you popped my breakers out, you saw things that nobody saw in here. I tell you what happens when a technically savvy estimator finds 3 major code violations or even 1. And the customer says, whoa, hey, I've had them say that before, many, many times. Whoa, hey, there was another electrician here this morning. I got another bid, I'm just letting you know. And he didn't mention that. That seems pretty important. Why do you think he didn't mention that? I say, hey, I don't have anything bad to say about anyone else. I'm not sure. You know, don't slam the competition and don't build yourself up. Contractors fall into the trap of saying, number 1 in service, best in class, number 1 in the state. You know what? You don't get to decide. You may put it on your website, but ultimately customers know. You don't get to decide who's number 1. You don't get to decide who's best in service. So differentiate with value and not with boasting. That speaks to a customer when they see the technical acumen that gives them feelings of safety, feelings of being in the right hands. That $50 estimating fee, that allows you to spend the time to find the problems, to set up operations for a slam dunk, and make finance and admin happy as clams. Here's one of my convictions. I am on the march, the path to pay my residential electricians $100,000 a year. Make no apology about it. If a customer would like to know, I'll tell them. And I'll tell my team too. It's a goal and it's an objective, and I need to get there sooner rather than later if I'm going to maintain trust, and I need to price my jobs accordingly so I can pay accordingly, so I can get paid accordingly, and everything works out. Ultimately, my happiest customers are the ones that I take the best care of because I shortchanged nothing, because I priced the job right and all the expectations were set and all the outcomes are excellent. Don't shortchange yourself, don't shortchange your value, and do not shortchange your team. They're worth it. On a big project, let me give you some magic. Here's magic. And it's this. You say to the customer, and this is only for big jobs that you're going to be in their kitchen, on a remodel, a whole house rewire, a room addition, something that's going to disrupt their life in a significant way. You say, Mr. Customer, let's pretend for a minute that we're 3/4 of the way through this job. and you've got some concerns. You've got some worries, or maybe your wife does. How are we going to handle that? Right, acknowledge it. Set the expectations. That is an expectations setting tool. You are resolving conflict before it starts. You are giving the customer permission to come to you. You are finding out how your customer handles conflict. Everybody's got cultural values, family values around conflict and relationships, and you have no idea what this customer is going to do. They might act happy and then refuse to pay the final bill. They might seem fine and then slam you on social media. You just don't know. And if you're going to do a big job where you have, as a company, a lot of exposure, let's pretend is a safe way to get clarity around how you're going to maintain the relationship through the ups and downs of the project. Some of those ups and downs may not be of your making. You may be flawless in your execution. I'm not, but you may be. But you'll still have weather contingencies that could bring it down. You still could have supply relationships that could bring you down. You could have an inspector. You could have time. All kinds of things that can bring you down. Let's pretend is magical language. Now let's pretend you're wrapping up and you're using a very powerful tool called Ballparking. Ballparking is this. Hey, I haven't put pen to paper yet, but right now this job is coming in between $5,000 and $7,000. I've got to tally everything up in a detailed fashion, but that's where we are right now. How does that sound to you? See, what I'm doing is a couple different things. One, I want to read the customer when I'm on site right in front of them. We take our estimates off site and we do a QVR. That's a quality value review before we send any estimate, because it's so important to get this right. This is the keystone of production, accounting, collections, is this estimate right here. Very valuable. Quality value review with a team member. So we do our estimates off site, but what I want to do when I'm on site with the customer face to face where it's hard to hide, I want to ballpark it. I want to know that we're still in the same ballpark and it's worth my time at this point to price it up for you. So I know panel upgrades, we're going to be between $1,500 and $2,500 for a 200 panel upgrade. Depends on the situation, depends on drywall and repairs and circuits and other conditions around the panel. So I'm going to ballpark it. Right now, we're between $1,500 and $2,500. How does that sound to you? And guys, you have to say it without a lump in your throat. You have to say it with money convictions. You can't let that head trash sneak in there, guys. I've had so much head trash in the past. I have wanted to be, falsely so, I've wanted to be the lowest bid. I've been unashamed about, I'm not that anymore. I'm unashamed about being the highest bid at times, or at least the middle bid, but the highest value bid. You gotta cut the head trash. You've gotta present to the customer. That pre-call that we did at the beginning, that's where I figured out my ballpark and my brackets, and I present to the customer. And the customer, sometimes, watch this, I've had customers say probably 20 or more times, whoa, that's more than I expected. Or, whew, that's too much. Or, whoa, that's a lot more than the other guy. They kind of put their hand on their chin, right? You're reading their body language. Like, now I'm a little suspicious. Shut up. The best thing you can do is shut up. Do not defend your position. Don't get squishy. Just shut up and listen. Let the pause hang. 2 seconds, 3 seconds. And you know what? The customer's almost without fail. You know what they do? They think about it, they take a sigh, and they say something like this. But actually, I didn't like the other guy very much. Didn't feel like I could trust him. He didn't mention those couple of things that you mentioned. Those seem pretty important. And the customer starts selling for you. They're selling for you. Shut up, get out of your way. Don't defend your position. You're worth what you're worth. Do not diminish your value. Shut up. And the customer says, and they keep going. They're like, you know what? And he was a lot cheaper, but he was actually 4 weeks out. I don't think we can wait that long. You said you're 2 weeks out, right? That seems okay to me. And they start selling the job for you. You just have to be quiet. You just don't have to be defensive and pushing, trying to, well, maybe we can find some space in the schedule. No, cramming and jamming up the schedule causes problems of every kind. You fail to execute. You stress out your team. You're paying overtime. Don't defend the position. Or the customer says, that is more than what I expected, but actually, I hadn't done any research on it. And I'm thinking about it now, and you made quite a few good points here, and I do see it's going to be a lot of work. And I I need to check with my husband, but that actually sounds okay. Yeah, I think we can do that. That's in the budget. You would be surprised if you've done your due diligence and you're bonding with this customer and you've gotten sources of contention out of the way and you've given them walk away power and you've held them safe and you've been the doctor and the other contractors have not done that. When you're differentiated and they've got free drink cards to the favorite coffee shop and they're not going to use them but their friend is, and they're feeling like the good guy and you're not talking down to them, at this point the homeowner starts selling for you and they're like, yeah, we could wait 2 weeks. Yeah, $2,500 sounds okay. I don't see why not. And I'll check with my husband on that, but that seems okay. Yeah, we're fine. That sounds good. Let's keep talking, right? You see the buying language? You see that every one of those expressions was confirmation that you're doing your job, not just as a technician, but as a person and a salesman. There are two things going on here, and you can't just have one skill set or the other. You gotta hold both. All right, now the final thing you need to do is the final audit. You have to know, you have to at least, if not every job, at least periodically audit your jobs to know where you're coming out. From the projection to the final results, what's the delta? What's the gap? What's the disparity? You have to look back at your jobs. I anticipated 10 man hours and it took 12. I anticipated 6 and it took 3. Overcharging can be at times as harmful to your business as undercharging. I recommend accuracy plus contingency. Accuracy plus a contingency, because you're too valuable, your family's too valuable, your mortgage is too valuable. It's too important for you to not do an audit. You've got to slow down to speed up. Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. And if you don't know where your numbers are falling, then you don't know where you're going. If any of this has helped you and you'd like to learn from the mistakes that I've made, subscribe to Electric Pro Academy for real skills to make real money, and check the description for a one-on-one business coaching link, you and me.